World War II witnessed the Holocaust, a systematic state-sponsored genocide by Nazi Germany. Millions of people were thrown into Nazi concentration camps through various cruel methods. Some were arrested for political resistance or activities deemed dangerous to the regime, for example, opposition figures, members of resistance movements, trade unionists, or intellectuals who did not align with Nazi ideology. In occupied countries, massive roundups were carried out. People were often randomly seized from the streets to be used as forced laborers. This mass murder was conducted in unprecedented ways. Victims were systematically killed in gas chambers, through mass shooting operations, and through intentional starvation, the spread of disease, and brutal treatment in the camps. In Poland, for instance, the first transport of prisoners to Auschwitz in June 1940 contained 728 Poles from the Tarnow prison. They included a wide range of people, from those who tried to cross the border illegally, resistance and political activists, intellectuals, to Jewish residents targeted by racist policies. After the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, hundreds of thousands of Soviet prisoners of war were also sent to the camps. Many of them were immediately executed or left to die from the horrific conditions. Furthermore, millions of Jewish citizens from all over Europe, from infants, children, adults to the elderly, were deported in crowded cattle cars to death camps as part of the Nazi effort to annihilate their entire community. The Nazi concentration camps became the ultimate symbol of this cruelty. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies established more than 44,000 camps and other detention sites in the territories under their control. These camps were used for various purposes: forced labor, detention of political opposition, and mass extermination. Upon arrival at the camps, the prisoners' lives were utterly inhumane. They were confined in narrow, squalid barracks, often packed far beyond their normal capacity. A barrack in Auschwitz-Birkenau, for example, was designed with 3-tiered wooden bunks, with each bunk crammed with 4 prisoners, totaling more than 700 people in one barrack, without adequate sanitation facilities. The prisoners were given barely enough food to survive, just a little thin soup or hard bread per day. Due to chronic starvation, many fell into a state of extreme emaciation known as Muselmann. Infectious diseases like typhus were rampant in the camps due to poor hygiene and malnutrition. In Auschwitz, thousands of prisoners died within the first few months simply from exhaustion, starvation, beatings, and disease before they could even face other methods of slaughter. Forced labor was mercilessly enforced in extreme weather conditions, without adequate equipment, under the threat of whips and guns. For those who were too weak or sick to work, a more horrifying fate awaited: systematic execution. The Nazis employed torture and arbitrary death penalties, from on-the-spot shootings, mass hangings in front of other prisoners, to sadistic experiments by SS doctors. Behind the cruelty of this concentration camp system stood the individuals who played a major role in the prisoners' suffering. One of the people responsible for the deplorable conditions of the prisoners was Friedrich Karl Hermann Entress. He was a Nazi SS doctor who worked in various concentration and extermination camps during World War II. Friedrich Karl Hermann Entress was born on December 8, 1914, in the city of Posen. He studied medicine and graduated as a young doctor just before the start of World War II. He was able to receive his doctorate in 1942 without writing a dissertation, a special privilege granted at that time to German citizens born in the Eastern Territories. Along with his academic career, the young Entress was also exposed to the racist and brutal ideology of the Nazis. According to historian Michael Cater, before the war, Entress was part of a vigilante group of ethnic Germans in Poland that received support from the Schutzstaffel organization. After Nazi Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Entress officially joined the SS Totenkopfverbände, the special death's head unit of the SS tasked with running the concentration camps. This step marked the beginning of Entress' active role in the Nazi machinery of oppression. In 1941, at around the age of 27, Friedrich Entress was assigned as a concentration camp doctor. His first post was at the Gross Rosen concentration camp in Poland in early 1941. Shortly thereafter, his career took him to the largest and most lethal camp, Auschwitz. Entress was assigned to the main camp, Auschwitz I, from December 11, 1941, to October 21, 1943. In March 1943, he was transferred to the Buna Monowitz subcamp, a forced labor camp in the Auschwitz complex that served the IG Farben chemical factory, and served as the camp doctor there until October 1943. Entress' reputation as a cruel SS doctor was further cemented when he was transferred to another major concentration camp, Mauthausen in Austria. Starting in October 1943, Entress served as a senior doctor in the Mauthausen camp complex, a position he held until around July 1944. This high-ranking position demonstrated the SS regime's trust in him to manage the camp's medical affairs. In every assignment, Entress was not merely a clinical doctor, but an integral part of the killing apparatus in the camps. He was often directly involved in the selection of prisoners, the process of sorting who was considered strong enough for forced labor, and who would be immediately exterminated. In Auschwitz, for example, Entress led a selection on August 29, 1942, with SS officer Josef Clare, under the pretext of a health check to control a typhus outbreak. As a result, they selected 746 sick or weak prisoners to be sent to the gas chambers for immediate execution. Besides sending people to the gas chambers, another method of murder in Auschwitz was through lethal injection, and Entress played a major role in its implementation. During his service at the Monowitz subcamp, Entress witnessed how deadly the forced labor system was there. The IG Farben synthetic rubber factory in Monowitz exhausted the prisoners to the point that many were on the verge of death. Later, Entress himself admitted that the death rate in Monowitz was extremely high, stating, "The turnover of prisoners in Monowitz was truly extraordinary. The prisoners were weak and undernourished. It must be emphasized that the work demands placed upon them were completely disproportionate to their living conditions and nutrition." One of the most horrifying aspects of Entress's role was the human medical experiments he conducted on prisoners, especially at Auschwitz. Along with other SS doctors like Dr. Helmut Vetter and Dr. Eduard Wirtz, Entress conducted various inhumane biomedical experiments in Block 21 of Auschwitz. He even collaborated with a major German pharmaceutical company. The Bayer Company, a subsidiary of the IG Farben conglomerate, provided funds and supplies for Entress to test experimental drugs for diseases like typhus and tuberculosis, using prisoners as test subjects. Entress established a special tuberculosis ward in Auschwitz to gather these patients. Instead of treating them, he performed a brutal procedure, intentionally collapsing or destroying the lungs of prisoners infected with tuberculosis as part of an experimental therapy trial. After performing a series of procedures on the victims' bodies, which often caused excruciating suffering, Entress faced the next problem: what to do with the prisoners whose conditions worsened as a result of the experiments. His diabolical solution was to kill them and then cover his tracks. It was here that Entress executed the victims with phenol injections. Phenol is a toxic chemical substance. Dr. Entress introduced the practice of injecting a high dose of phenol directly through the chest wall into the victim's heart to kill them instantly. It is estimated that 100 people could be killed per day using this technique. Towards the end of World War II, as Nazi Germany's defeat was imminent, many perpetrators of the Holocaust tried to flee or hide their crimes. However, the wheels of international justice began to turn to demand accountability. Nazi power collapsed as Allied forces entered German territory and occupied Europe. The remaining concentration camps were liberated one by one between 1944 and 1945. When the Mauthausen camp was liberated by American Allied soldiers in early May 1945, Friedrich Entress was captured as a prisoner by the Allied forces. After the war, the Allies held a series of military tribunals against Nazi war criminals. Friedrich Entress became one of the defendants in the Mauthausen camp personnel trial, which was conducted by the American Military Tribunal at Dachau, Germany. After an intensive trial, the verdict was delivered in May 1946. Entress, along with the majority of the other defendants, was found guilty of war crimes. Entress was sentenced to death along with the majority of the other defendants. The execution of Friedrich Entress followed shortly after all appeals were rejected. He was part of a large group of death row inmates from the Mauthausen case who were executed sequentially. On May 28, 1947, at Landsberg Prison, a prison managed by the Americans to punish Nazi war criminals, Entress was hanged to death at the age of 32.